Backfield replacements made a lot of noise in week 5 fantasy matchups, and we've got more of those situations to talk about for week 6. Does a lack of role clarity mean we should just skip a group entirely? Or does it present a big value opportunity? We're going to talk through that, week 5's surprise receiving star, and streaming defenses for this week, next week, and maybe even beyond. An all new Draft Sharks podcast starts right now. Matt Schauf and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here to talk week 6 waiver wire targets. And we're starting in the backfield, Jared, with a guy who got picked up in a lot of places last week, but remained available in 60% of Yahoo leagues as of Monday morning. I was surprised. I was checking the rostered rate just to see if he still made sense for our waiver article for this week. And he does. It's Michael Carter, like I said, was still available in 60% of Yahoo leagues as of Monday morning. We saw him take over the Arizona backfield in week 5 with no Trey Benson. Of course, James Conner already sidelined. I'll start with the negative on Carter. Was inefficient with the ball against a weak Titans defense, no less. 2.8 yards per carry, 4.4 yards per catch. But of course, the positive and the one that outweighs that inefficiency is that he dominated the work. 18 of 25 running back rushes, 5 of 6 running back targets. What do we do with Michael Carter now?
Yeah, we basically saw Trey Benson step into the James Conner role when Conner went down. Now we basically got Michael Carter stepping into that same exact role with Conner and Benson out, where he's getting the vast majority of their early down work. He basically lost one series to Bam Knight, and Knight happened to score a touchdown on that series. But otherwise, it was Carter on early downs dominating the carries, as you said, Matt. Ran her out on 49% of the pass plays. So, he was losing the obvious passing down stuff to Emari Demercado, but Carter got the 5 targets, pretty strong route rate. He was the RB6 in expected PPR points last week, the RB9 in actual PPR points. The risk here would be that the inefficiency leads to, this role kind of declining. But Bam Knight was not any more efficient. He also averaged 2.8 yards per carry. Emari Demercado busted off the long run, but as everyone knows, fumbled it away at the goal line. I would be shocked if his role grows going forward after that. So I think the most likely thing here actually is that Carter just gets more efficient, because I still think he's a pretty good player. Like, he was a good prospect. He played with Javonte Williams at UNC. I think he's better than what he produced efficiency-wise last week. So I expect him to remain in a similar role for at least the next 3 games with Trey Benson on IR. And Adam Schefter reported on Sunday that Benson could even miss a couple games beyond that. So it's going to be the Colts this week, significantly tougher matchup than Tennessee, and then Green Bay after that, a really tough matchup. Then the Cardinals have their bye. Then they get Dallas, though, the following week, where Benson will, definitely be out again for that game. So if nothing else for that matchup, Carter is going to be a very exciting fantasy play. And even these next 2 weeks, I think, just based on this role, he's probably going to be like a low end RB2 in our rankings.
Yeah, according to fantasy points data, Michael Carter played the largest share of early down snaps for any Cardinals running back this season. Now, that doesn't mean, obviously, that Michael Carter is better than either James Conner or Trey Benson, because both of those guys are out of the way. It does mean that the Cardinals, at the very least this past week, liked Michael Carter a lot better than the other guys around him. Bam Knight's been in the league for years on multiple teams. Emari Demercado's been in Arizona for a couple of years, so the coaches know him, and they gave the ball willingly to Michael Carter ahead of those guys. I agree the efficiency probably improves over what it was against Tennessee, because 2.8 yards per carry, 4.4 per catch, you don't belong in the NFL level numbers. And I think Michael Carter probably belongs in the NFL. I don't think he's that good, though. I would, if I'm in pretty good shape where Michael Carter is somebody that I'm considering starting, but he's probably my 3rd or worst running back, I'd shop him pretty hard this week to see if there's a desperate manager in my league who needs that running back help, who might overpay for it, because he did score a touchdown amid those inefficiency numbers. That certainly helps, certainly got good receiving volume. So overall, it looks like a good scoring profile from the game. I don't think you would be giving away anything special. And at the same time, Michael Carter should remain usable for that stretch that you just mentioned. So not a guy that you need to sell. Makes it a good time to see just how much he might be worth on the open market. Matchup with the Colts, not nearly as positive as the Titans this week, but also not a scary one. Packers could be a tough matchup. The work volume should help. And I agree with you, Jared. I expect the work to stay on Michael Carter's side. I was Surprised to see that Emari Demercado did get the ball again. It was one more touch before the end of the game after his flub. So I think he'll stay involved, but it's also not going to be a week to expect the ball to go his way more often.
Yeah, and Jonathan Gannon said on Monday that, there's going to be like no further discipline for Demercado after that play. So I do expect him to, but I expect him to remain in the role. And Demercado's role did not change. This was the same role he was playing behind Trey Benson, where he's getting most of the passing down stuff, but he's not going to do much on the ground. So I hate to say it, if you picked up Demercado, and I don't know how aggressively folks went after him, but he's almost droppable, I think, because I just, maybe if Carter goes down, he is kind of forced into a bigger role, but otherwise I just don't think Demercado is going to be someone you can use in fantasy lineups.
Yeah, I mean, I think he gets the ball more if Michael Carter goes down, which makes him stashable depending on what your decisions are, but certainly not somebody that you need to cling to. Funny, though, Jonathan Gannon might be in more trouble coming out of that game than Emari Demercado because of the video of him, yelling at him. Seemed like he hit Demercado as he was walking away from him. He had to talk to the team about it, he said afterwards. So a goofball situation we're probably not going to see any more repercussions beyond that, but not good things for the Arizona backfield right now. Good things though in New Orleans, especially for a guy that we've liked for a couple years now, at least. Kendre Miller for the Saints increased his snap share every single week. He has increased his total snaps each of the past 3 games. Jared, we also saw double-digit carries the past 2 weeks. His touches have increased as the season's gone on. We also saw Kendre Miller play a season-low share of the special team snaps in week 5, which might be another subtle hint that the Saints want to make him more important on offense, want him to be more involved on that front, and want to ease him back from those, potential injury situations. So what else do we like about Kendre Miller right now?
Yeah, with Miller 2 weeks ago in that game against the Bills, that game stayed pretty tight throughout, and it was just a super run-heavy game plan against a Bills team that is much tougher against the pass than the run, and that was kind of what led to Kendre Miller getting the amount of work he did. Last week, though, he out-carried Alvin Kamara 10-8. That was the first time this season that Kendre Miller out-carried Alvin Kamara. So he's definitely trending up. Now, in the short term, I don't think, Kamara's not going away. And also, Taysom Hill, shockingly to me, returned, coming off a serious knee injury like 10 months ago at 35 years old, returned last week and got 6 carries. So we got to deal with that now, too. It's, basically like a 3-man rotation in this backfield on a team that's still not very good. I still think Miller is short of like exciting standalone fantasy value. The upside here is if Alvin Kamara gets traded, which makes all the sense in the world. This is an old running back on a team going nowhere. He could help the Chargers. We're going to talk about next year. Like, that'd be an awesome fit. We don't see trades happen a ton in the NFL. I wouldn't bet on a Kamara trade happening, but that's kind of where Kendre Miller becomes an exciting stash, is if Kamara gets dealt, or of course if Kamara goes down, he has a lengthy injury history, then Kendre Miller becomes someone I think you could use in fantasy lineups.
Of course, complicating those trade chances are the fairly big contract that Kamara still has with New Orleans. I would assume that they would have to pick up a good bit of that. That might increase the trade return that they're looking for from the other team. So we'll see what happens on that front. But for Kendre Miller himself, not only has his role trended up, he's also just outplaying Alvin Kamara as a rusher so far. He leads Kamara in yards per carry, leads him in rush yards over expected per attempt, leads him in yards after contact per attempt, has forced more missed tackles, 15-14, despite rushing 35 fewer times so far than Kamara has. So Kendre Miller's playing well. He still needs help to be fantasy relevant, a little bit more attractive in non-PPR leagues. Maybe there's some standalone value in that format. Beyond this week, I wouldn't look to play him against the Patriots. But at the very least, Kendre Miller looks like a nice handcuff level stash. And, it's nice to see him start to deliver on some of the promise that we've been thinking was there over the past couple years.
Yeah, it looks awesome for sure. The Saints offense isn't good, but Kellen Moore's at least doing the thing where he plays super fast and runs a lot of plays. The Saints are like near the top of the NFL in snaps. So again, like there's fantasy value to be had here. Again, I think it's going to take a Kamara trade or injury to, move Miller beyond like low end RB3 status.
And by the way, stashing Kendre Miller in a dynasty league, not a bad idea if you can make that happen. You mentioned those Chargers, Jared. Let's move to that backfield. The big change, of course, there is Omarion Hampton injuring his left ankle. He's out at least 4 weeks on IR. We'll see beyond that. No guarantees back after that. So the question, obviously, with Najee Harris already out as well, what's the plan? To me, the answer is honestly, we'll see.
It's definitely we'll see. It's Hassan Haskins, Kamani Vidal. I'm pretty sure neither of these guys is good, which obviously makes it a tough situation to get excited about. It matters though because we know Emari and Hampton's out for at least 4 weeks, and then the schedule for the Chargers, they get Miami this week, who we just saw give up a career day to Rico Dowdle. It's the Colts after that, which is a tougher matchup. Again, they're 11th in adjusted points allowed to running backs. And then it's Minnesota, who is 20th against RBs, and Tennessee, who is 31st against RBs. So there is upside here because, there's going to be 20, 25 RB carries to go around on this team, at least in some good matchups. Where the work is going to go, we don't know at this point. There's a chance by when we get to the end of this week, we're going to have a good idea. I think we saw that in Arizona. I think by the time we got to Sunday morning, we kind of knew that Michael Carter was going to be the guy that you wanted to start in fantasy lineups. But in terms of waivers this week, if you have room to stash both, I think that's okay. Because I think, again, because of the schedule, there's a chance that one of these guys is relevant. If I had to take one right now, I am leaning Hassan Haskins. And that's based on what we've seen so far this season, where Haskins has been active for all 5 games. He's played at least a few offensive snaps in all 5 games. Kamani Vidal has only been active the last 2 games since Najee Harris has been out. And then you just look at last week's game. Haskins was the first back into that game after Emari and Hampton exited. Both Haskins and Vidal ended up getting 3 carries and 1 target after Hampton exited. It was also Vidal, though, in the game, in the final series, when the Chargers pulled most of their starters. They pulled Justin Herbert. They had Trey Lance in at quarterback. So I'm guessing, and again, total guess, that Haskins is going to get the first crack this coming week to, lead the backfield. Probably a situation where whoever gets off to a better start ends up leading the backfield the rest of the way, and maybe even for the next, 3 weeks beyond that.
It certainly might be Haskins. I'll be surprised if they're not rotating these guys in some fashion in this game. And we'll obviously keep watch for more word on the plan ahead of the game. I'm going Vidal over Haskins, though. Like you said, we have seen Haskins be the one that's active on game days. I think he's the guy that Jim Harbaugh feels comfortable with. They go back to their Michigan days where Haskins played for Harbaugh as the coach there. So, he knows that Haskins is the guy that plays special teams, that if there's an emergency during the game, he can throw him in there and get what he needs. Vidal, for whatever reason, not nearly as trustworthy on the practice squad, but when they need him, has gotten more touches than Haskins. They were both on the team last year in Harbaugh's first Chargers season. Vidal was only active for 10 games, Haskins for all 17, but Vidal had more carries and more targets for that season. He also he has more juice, 4.46 second 40 time versus a 4.57 for Hassan Haskins. I know Haskins is bigger, but Vidal's deceptively solid, 5'8", 213. So decent size for him. 92 college catches, probably a better receiving bet than Hassan Haskins is overall. 4 years of strong use at Troy. That said, Vidal's per touch yardage did not seem to match his testing time there. Fairly limited in both yards per carry and yards per catch. So I think ultimately neither of these guys, like you said, is all that good. And it quite possibly could be that neither of them gives us any fantasy value. I mean, it's a great matchup, and that's the main reason that we're talking about either of them being relevant in week 6. It's quite possible that neither of these guys helps your team, and I would not bet on either one right now being your Michael Carter for week 6.
Yeah. Yep, I'm with that. The Chargers, of course, are missing both their tackles, and we saw last week, this had been a pass heavy team for the first 4 games. Last week, they went run heavy. They were minus 6% pass rate over expected against the Washington team that's better against the run than the pass. I assume the change in play calling was because of those tackles and the Chargers just not trusting their pass protection to hold up. I got to assume now they lean back towards the pass. They're screwed either way. They have poor pass protection. They have a poor backfield now. If I'm the coaching staff, I'm putting it in Herbert's hands, figure it out, but despite the poor pass protection. We'll see which way that leans. The other note here is, Harbaugh was asked Monday about the backfield. He mentioned Haskins. He mentioned Vidal. He talked about Amar Johnson on the practice squad. I don't know anything about Amar Johnson. Should probably look into that after this show. He also, Harbaugh said, quote, "We'll look at other avenues as well." And Gus Edwards is out there who, knows this offense from multiple years playing under this coaching staff. Again, I think Alvin Kamara trade would be awesome. Probably doesn't happen. I do think there's a decent chance we get Gus Edwards added to this mix as well, which would make it much messier.
How about Jerome Ford, by the way? He'd probably be a lot cheaper in trade than Alvin Kamara would.
Well, I mean, honestly, almost any trade they can make, I think, would be an upgrade over the 2 guys they have in the backfield right now.
Yeah, certainly going to be interesting to watch. I got to think that they are seriously considering any trade options. At running back in particular, you can get guys for not a big trade price, looking at the other rosters. And like you said, Gus Edwards on the street right now. So there will be options. They'll probably add somebody. It's going to be interesting. Now we're going to switch away from backfields, though, where Kendrick Bourne lit up the box score on Thursday night in the surprising Niners win over the Rams. 10 catches, 142 yards on 11 targets, tied Jake Tongas for the team target lead. That gives you more context about where the Niners offense was with no Ricky Pearsall, no Juwan Jennings, already no George Kittle. Sky Moore, by the way, still managed to get 0 targets in that game, so he continues to be irrelevant. Demarcus Robinson led that team in pass routes, 4 ahead of Bourne, trailed Bourne with just 7 targets. So what do we do with Bourne this week? What's the outlook on the other pass catchers that will affect whether Bourne is an option for our lineups?
Yeah, awesome outing for Bourne. Obviously, a guy who's, I think, always probably been underrated. You just look at the box score stuff, like the yards per target has always been strong. The yards per route is always, he's just been an efficient receiver. I think it's another example of throw anyone into this San Francisco offense under Shanahan, and they have a chance to be efficient and put up big games like this. With Bourne, it obviously all comes down to the health of these other 49ers. Kyle Shanahan said that George Kittle is not expected back this week for this game against the Bucs. Ian Rappaport said before that Thursday night game, though, that Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall should be back for this game. Now, supposedly Jennings was on the field for the Monday practice, coming off the Thursday night game, and Ricky Pearsall was not. I don't know what that means. I think to be a reliable fantasy play, Bourne needs one of those guys to miss. If Jennings or Pearsall misses, I think Kendrick Bourne's going to find his way into the wide receiver 3 range of our rankings. If both those guys are back, though, I would not want to use him in fantasy lineups.
Agree with that. Bourne, of course, played for the Niners before going to New England. And the factor that I didn't consider enough heading into Thursday night was that he spent 3 years with Mac Jones with those Patriots, including the 2021 season that still stands as the career best year for both of those guys, Bourne and Mac Jones. So there's probably something to that familiarity with Mac Jones, even if it's just like, my first read didn't work. I'm going to look for Kendrick because he's a veteran and I know where he's going to be. So we'll be watching the health of those other guys. I certainly think there is room for Bourne to potentially be an option here and there. If either or both of those wideouts return, then it's going to be difficult to use Bourne. But I would at least bet on Kendrick Bourne over Demarcus Robinson for now, especially if and when Mac Jones is starting.
Yeah, for sure. I think the takeaway on waivers, though, is don't be too aggressive acquiring Kendrick Bourne. Like if you're desperate for a wide receiver this week, I could see it, but I would assume he's gonna, go for too much, go for more than he should in fab leagues.
Yeah, he's, I would say, a less good option than even Trey Tucker was a couple weeks ago because Tucker at least had that role no matter who came back healthy going forward.
Yep, I agree.
By the way, Marquez Valdez-Scantling led this team in routes from the slot in that game. I don't think that really matters for anything, but I was just looking at the numbers and I was like, really?
Weird game, and they won somehow.
Yep. Kyle Shanahan, I guess. Mason Taylor, 9 catches for 67 yards in a Week 5 loss to Dallas. Jared, should I just chalk that up to garbage time and ignore Taylor? Is there something here?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, these last 2 games for the Jets have been a lot of garbage time stuff. We might continue to see that, though. Now, the good thing for Taylor is that the role has been there. Really, the routes have been there all season. He's been like 75 to 85% of the routes all season. The targets have started to follow now. Even 3 weeks ago, 16% of the targets, and then 26 and 25% these last 2 weeks. So at this point, he is the clear number 2 target in this passing game. It's a bad passing game. It's a passing game that wants to be low volume when it can. The Jets defense is so bad that it's been boosting the passing volume, and that might continue. I think Taylor's going to have his duds when the Jets do have games where they throw it 28 times. But again, I think he could stay around a 20% target share the rest of the season, and that's just pretty rare for a tight end. So he's definitely worth adding in almost all. 12-team leagues, he should be rostered. Even most 10-team leagues, I think he should be rostered. I think he's kind of like a low-end tight end 1 going forward.
Yeah, beyond the obvious starter level tight ends that we can all look at and say, yeah, he belongs in your lineup most weeks. What you're looking for in, that more fluid range of tight end is somebody who is at least among his team's top 2 targets. And that's where Mason Taylor is right now for the Jets. And there's nobody really challenging him for that spot. And at tight end, we can take a little bit more of the uncertainty on target volume week to week. If he has a 4-target game, it's not going to be like, where the hell did Mason Taylor go? I got to find somebody else to replace him. You got to absorb some of those. I agree. He's in position to continue getting work. He's on a bad enough team that they're probably going to keep having to throw more than they want to. And, Justin Fields, not a great quarterback, but his scrambling ability at least keeps some plays alive that wouldn't be alive elsewhere. Maybe that creates more pass attempts, certainly creates more rushing attempts. So Mason Taylor, fine option if you've been in trouble at tight end, or if you have one guy that's just been okay and you'd like to pair somebody else with him just to fortify that position going forward. I think he's a good pickup. Might be a little bit expensive, but there are a couple other kind of fallback options at tight end this week that you can look at in our waiver wire article.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tough decision this week is like Mason Taylor versus Theo Johnson. They're very similar guys playing increased roles now, younger players in like iffy passing games. I think I lean towards Taylor. I just think he's probably a better player. He was a better prospect, went earlier in his draft. The fact that he's already doing what he's doing, 5 games into his NFL career, I just think he's probably a better player, and I'll lean towards that if I'm picking between those two.
Yeah, like you said, very similar. Feel free to put in bids on both of them. They could be even bids. You could go $1 more on Mason Taylor to try to get him. But yeah, coming away with one of those guys, if you're in trouble at tight end, would be a good move. Week 6 streaming defense, Jared, what's your favorite target?
Check if the Packers are available in your league coming off the bye. They're obviously still think they're an elite defense despite what Dallas did to them last time out, but they get the Bengals this week. So they're obviously maybe the best defensive play this week.
Also focused this week though on the Browns, who I've actually been looking at for a couple of weeks. We've mentioned on here stashing them for upcoming matchups. I'm okay with playing them this week against Pittsburgh, even on the road. I'm especially, though, looking ahead with the Browns to next week, where they are home against Miami. Then they're at New England in week 8. We'll see about that one. The Patriots looked like a very good matchup earlier in the year. The team that was in Buffalo, a little bit less so, but still could go either way on that one. So we'll see if I'm ready to start Cleveland in week 8. We got a week 9 bye for the Browns. Then they're at the Jets in week 10, some version of the Ravens in week 11. No way for us to judge that one right now. At the Raiders in week 12, a week 14 date with the Titans. So if you are in a league where your roster is deep enough to carry 2 defenses, I would recommend picking up the Browns, stashing them, and playing around with which one you put in your lineup week to week going forward. That's something I'm doing with my FFPC main event team, where I'm having two defenses on that 20 spot roster. I know that there's more upside to stashing handcuff running backs in those spots where available. The other side, though, is I'm more likely to use this defense that I'm pairing with the other one. So I'm not saying that this is the right way to go. I'm just saying it's one way to play it.
Yeah, and the Browns delivered a pretty nice game for us last week, and I recommended them as a start against Minnesota. So I definitely like that call. I have a lot of Browns stashed on my teams right now. I also like grabbing the Patriots. Now, I prefer the Colts over the Patriots this week. The Patriots are at New Orleans, and New Orleans has surprisingly not been a great matchup for defenses. Spencer Rattler hasn't been taking a lot of sacks, hasn't been throwing many interceptions. Now it's still a nice floor play, because I don't think the Saints are going to score a ton of points, and New England's defense has been good. So I think they're an okay defense this week, but the next 2 weeks, Tennessee and Cleveland. So you're probably going to find New England as a top 5 defense in our rankings the following 2 weeks. You can add them, use them this week, and keep them for the next 2 weeks.
You can also find more streaming defenses in Jody Smith's weekly article that hits the site every Monday. You can find more waiver wire tips for offense and IDP on draftsharks.com now as well. And whatever kind of help or replacement you're looking for, the free agent finder is ready to guide you for every single team that you have synced at draftsharks.com. That's just one of the many tools that we have built to make Draft Sharks your unfair advantage. Hey!